This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Cult Popture podcast. You're of course listening to listening to Film Franchise. I'm nervous. You're listening to Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. I am AJ, joined as usual by Richard. Hi, Richard.
What's up? Hey, mate.
And we have a very special guest to talk to us about this fortnight's franchise. With us, it's American comedian, internet celebrity, and all-around pop culture guy. I don't know what you would prefer, Michael. It's Michael Swaim. Hey, Michael.
Hey, howdy. Happy to be here. I really just have an interest in and around cults. You said you're nervous. I assume that's because I'm American. We're prone to fits of public violence and justified, fair enough.
Yeah.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for coming on. Our listeners may know Michael from his fantastic web series such as After Hours or Agents of Crack over at crack.com, or your new online comedy networks. It's still new. It's a couple years old now, but it's post-cracked, yeah?
We're
Small
3.
Beans?
Yeah, Small
Nice.
Beans. Small Beans is roughly 3.
Cool, awesome. So, not to make this awkward and gushy up top, but Michael, it would be an understatement to say that your work has had a massive influence on us here at Cult Popture. And part of the reason we wanted to come on and chat with us about the Meet the Parents series is because that's sort of what we're doing right now by talking to you.
Oh, because I'm old enough to be your parents?
No, because you're our daddy. You're our content daddy. You're our pop culture comedy content daddy.
Much like Dustin Hoffman, you'll later find out some stuff that'll make you want to distance yourself from me. I get it. No, that means so much. Thank you guys for the kind words. And hey, lean into that awkwardness, because that's really at the core of the comedy of the franchise we're talking about. So
that's true.
I think we should just stew in it for as long as we can.
Yeah, well, if it makes it more awkward, I can tell you that AJ's been planning that joke for a month. And it would have. I was tempted to send you an email, not off the Cult Popture email account, but just from my own, just being like, "Hey, AJ's going to make this joke. Please don't laugh at it." To really put us into that kind of Jack Burns, Gaylord Fokker kind of relationship.
I was gonna say, is that because it's appropriate to the franchise, or are you just a bad friend? And that's the kind of thing you do.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
There you go.
If you were to, I don't expect you to have, but if you were to look at any of our YouTube content or anything, Michael, you'd probably be like, this is very similar voice to my own, I think. We recently did a series called, what was it called?
Does compute.
No. We did it. I was raised on does not compute, man. Like that was like my first internet pop culture. This is so embarrassing. Nice. I did not expect to be gushing this much. I'm so sorry. This is as awkward as I was hoping it would be.
More.
We made a show called Ready to Record, which was like what we talk about before we record the podcast, which is, as I'm sure you've figured out, very similar to After Hours.
Oh, sure.
So we got a comment once that was like, "This is just like After Hours," and it was like, "Oh my god!"
AJ cried.
The nicest.
Yeah, you consider it a compliment. I love it.
All right, well, maybe I will be more confident and less awkward if we just jump into it.
I doubt it.
So this is, of course, Film Franchise Fortnights, where we talk about a film franchise every fortnight, and this fortnight we're talking about Meet the Parents. It's a series of 4, that's right, 4 films.
Right, yeah, notably.
more well known for its trilogy of Meet the Parents in 2000, Meet the Fockers in 2004, and Little Fockers in 2010, though we did discover relatively late in the game that there is an original movie that the first film is a remake of. It's an independent comedy from 1992, also called Meet the Parents, and we sent you a frantic email after we'd finally sorted everything out, and we're like, oh, there's another one, is that okay? And you were like, yep, that's all good. So we watched that one as well.
I did indeed. I've got a lot to say about that one, but I'll save it.
Sweet. So, broadly speaking, the series follows the general conceit of a clumsy idiot protagonist trying and failing to impress his strict and scary father-in-law, played by Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro, respectively, in the main trilogy of films. And rounding out the rest of the cast, we also have Blythe Danner, Dustin Hoffman, Barbara Streisand, Terry Polo, Owen Wilson, Ray Santiago, Jessica Alba, Laura Dern, Harvey Keitel, Kevin Hart, and Emo Phillips, who appeared briefly in the original 1992 version, and it's probably also worth noting that Randy Newman also scored the remake and the first sequel.
And very clearly not the original.
Or the third one, for that matter.
Yeah.
So Meet the Parents is quite shockingly like, it's made a lot of money. I didn't know about this before we took it on, but the Meet the Parents series is actually the 49th highest grossing series of all time, grossing over $1 billion worldwide, which is very strange for a comedy series with a primarily adult audience. The only one that beats it is the Hangover trilogy. And Richard, you pointed out to me a couple of days ago that Robert De Niro's top 5 highest grossing films include Joker, Meet the Fockers, Meet the Parents, Shark Tale, and Little Fockers.
That's his top 5.
Fascinating, because I've often found myself, I'm weirdly never, like, gangster films never really appealed to me, and yet I've always loved Robert De Niro as an actor and always wished he found a way to do more alternate things. But now that you read that list, I'm like, I guess he did, and we loved it, and he made a bunch of money, and we all went home happy. But none of those are the movies that, of course, you would think of if you just name Robert De Niro and ask someone to list his filmography. That's so interesting.
Well, and because like I kind of respect the phase of his career that he's in, that he's just like, yeah, fuck it, sounds funny. Like there's behind the scenes things of him talking about taking on Dirty Grandpa, which was, a famously badly received movie. And he's like, yeah, I get to like chill out with Zac Efron and pretend to have sex with Aubrey Plaza. Like, yeah, why wouldn't I do it? And then Aubrey Plaza's like, why'd you do it? And she's like, yeah, I get to pretend to have sex with Robert De Niro. That's hilarious.
So the first film we're going to talk about today is Meet the Parents, the original from 1992. It was directed by a guy named Greg Gliena. I think that's how you would pronounce it. It has no score on Rotten Tomatoes and is barely even registered on the website. It doesn't have any of the information. There's a movie on the Rotten Tomatoes database called Meet the Parents 1992. That's about all the information that website provides. So that's the obscurity, I guess, of what this movie.
Well, let's put it this way. The big name in it is Emo Phillips. Emo Phillips is your A-lister Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Barbara Streisand anchor that's putting butts in seats. But man, what a fascinating watch. Knowing that this was ultimately snowballed into $1 billion comedy franchise with some of the greatest stars on earth. It's just so fascinating, especially because the only feature-length thing I've been a part of thus far, knock on wood, also available on YouTube, Kill Me Now, full movie on YouTube. Check it out. Similar ambitions and like aims and probably budgets, and it was just interesting to see one that ended up as $1 billion franchise and parse all the comedy through my nerd brain.
One that's still to achieve that.
And you know what? There are parts that are jarringly home movie-ish, and there are parts where I can get in Ben Stiller's head, or who was the driving force behind optioning the idea and developing it, because I can see the potential in the idea that they saw.
Yeah.
If they go in knowing, all right, I'm going to change everything and all the bits and make the jokes my jokes, and not end it with a suicide, because that's kind of
Yep.
tonally weird and jarring.
Yep.
But I'm going to buy this and I'm going to turn it into this, and that's going to sell. And they were right. Whoever it was it Ben Stiller?
It was one of the producers, actually, yeah.
Yeah, like the conglomerate Universal Pictures. But the whole reason this is so obscure is a calculated effort by Universal, right, to bury this film. Essentially, someone stumbled across it and was like, oh, fuck yeah, someone meets the parents and it's an awkward thing. And it's like they probably could have just stolen the idea and made something reasonably close, but they're like, no, we're gonna buy this and bury it so that no one can accuse us of plagiarism.
Yeah.
Because
you barely.
kind of cost
I
much.
mean, the father-in-law is not even a CIA operative, which changes the direction of the story like tremendously. There are nominal things. Actually, something just clicked for me as well. I've also had a screenplay stolen in Hollywood, and they did the exact same thing. So it's like if they hadn't, optioned it and buried it, which was the right thing to do if you're going to make your own version. But they changed Jinxie. There's that character essentially still exists, but it's a dog called Bingo instead of a cat called Jinxie. And again, because the original is a little grimmer than I think it needed to be. The dog dies, the Jinxie analog dies. But regardless, I just think it's fascinating to see an analogous film that frankly they could have gotten away with. They could have made it without optioning it. So it's cool. Like it's a, local team makes good success story, but it is fascinating to watch. And I'll forever be curious why Emo Phillips was involved and why Emo Phillips wrote an intro song that is a very straightforward song lyrically that just goes like, meet the parents, come on over and meet the parents. You're going to meet my parents. A very fascinating film artifact.
It's awesome to hear your guys' perspective on this, because researching this, I discovered that it's like it wasn't designed as a proof of concept, but it may as well have been. Like this version, for those who haven't seen it, who is probably everyone in the world, this version has a very low budget. It had almost no distribution and made almost no money. It did, however, turn industry heads and garnered some critical acclaim. And I think it's because the central concept is one of those ubiquitous ideas where it's like, this will, in the grand scheme of the universe, this situation will always end up being a movie. In every alternate universe, there's a comedy about meeting the parents, I think. And it's
a nexus.
Yeah, totally.
How badly though did you want? I mean, obviously they changed it for like good reasons. The bizarre framing device that the Meet the Parents story is being told by a gas station attendant who's like, hey, let me tell you about a time this other guy met the parents. But don't you wish that the gentleman who was wearing the white turtleneck with the white collared button down was the protagonist the whole time? Like,
I thought that, I thought that's where we were going. Yeah. So the framing device of this film, is like a guy stops for gas and the gas attendant's like, "Where you heading?" He's like, "I'm going to meet my girlfriend's parents." And this whole story is, it's one of the most like unnecessary framing devices I've ever seen. And I think it's because the story itself ends with Greg. He is called Greg in the original as well. Sort of being blamed for the suicide of his fiance's sister, and it ends with him nearly getting shot at by the father-in-law before it cuts back to the guy telling the story, and you find out that like the father-in-law missed Greg and killed the daughter and the wife by accident,
and then died of a heart attack.
It feels like it doesn't know how to end, and it wants to end in the worst possible way.
Sketch ending. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, well, maybe if we put it in a framing device, it'll be a little bit more palatable. And then of course, when that guy leaves, another guy comes in to tells the gas station attendant that he's taking his kids to the circus, and another story begins, which we don't see. Film critic Jonathan Rosenbaum likes this movie quite a lot. He thinks it's better than the remake, and called it the ultimate worst case scenario comedy, which I think is a perfect way to describe this franchise when it's at its strengths. Is you know the ultimate worst case scenario. I thought, what did you guys think of this film? Did you like it more than the original, or the remake, I should say? Did you hate it? What did you think?
Well, there was a learning curve period when it opens up and it's just photos of people's parents and the song that says meet the parents, meet the parents. My jaw was on the floor, and I thought I was about to see a really, obscene artifact dug up from the dustbin of history that I maybe should have avoided. But I actually found that it was fascinating to watch as a proof of concept, which I'm sure they didn't want it to be. But the core elements, not just that their names are Greg and Pam, although that is there for some reason. They kept those two names. There's none of the Fokker stuff, which of course becomes so important to the franchise. And I feel like the other main change that you notice immediately is this took the exact amount of what I'll call like AAA Hollywood heart, family is good, moral center, that the franchise has, that the trilogy has. Instead of that, it has underground sketch comedy energy. And I would say it kind of earns that by the end, only insofar as I find the jokes, much like the Meet the Parents trilogy, very straightforward and broad, classic jokes. But this is one of the earliest examples, and I have to imagine in 92, this felt way more transgressive than it does now. The cringe comedy, the thing that's a whole subgenre of like story to claim it by this point. I remember Meet the Parents, the quote unquote real one, the first Ben Stiller one, being the one that the first film where I went, oh my God, it's a new form of comedy. I've seen comedy where it's so gross it's funny. I've seen comedy where for some reason there's women's tits and that's supposed to be funny. I've seen the comedy where it's so clever it's funny. This is comedy that's so uncomfortable and sits in the moment for so long it's funny. And of course, that's a tried and true format now, but I think that's in our lifetimes. And I think Meet the Parents is one of the primary movers and shakers that brought cringe comedy, which is so big in things like The Office and, so many things that came after, you can see the proto that even in this guy, what was it, Greg Glenier?
Gliena, I think.
Gliena. He has moments where that really shines through, and I can see Ben Stiller doing the same kind of pivot that just makes you go, oh, this is so terrible. Can it get any worse? They did something really smart, which I think is take away that edge, make it 4-quadrant, make it about family is good by the end. Don't kill Jinx. Don't have the, frankly, like undiagnosed person with mental illness who like needs help and instead kills himself. And then you lampshade it by saying, oh, it's essentially a sketch because the gas station attendant is just lying, essentially. They did all these things to make it like a terrestrial film that could bear up and have sequels. But for something that is objectively not that good, the bones of it are interesting enough that it deserved to get remade. I see the wisdom behind it.
I love there's a certain charm to watching something that I feel like I could have made. And it's like, but there's some fantastic gags in this film, and it is that kind of. It's a relatable scenario, but also the kind of that worst case scenario thing you were saying, that these are the scenarios you go through in your head. Like when he takes the dad's car for a drive, and it's like you're terrified. It's like you're a good driver, or that you're not going to crash, but just getting blindsided, and then the guy just shrugs his shoulders and drives off, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's, but my favorite,
amazing. He didn't have insurance, a license, or plates.
Yeah, and it's like it just sounds so unbelievable to then go and say that this happened. But my favorite joke in the film was at the start when he's trying to impress the parents, and he mentions, being a hard worker, and he says, a penny saved is a penny earned. And the dad starts crying, and they're like, what's wrong? And they're like, oh, his mum's name was Penny. He keeps her ashes in an urn. And I was like, my God, how have I not heard this joke before?
So
it's
pun.
so good.
How is someone, it seems like it should have been told already in a movie.
Yeah. How is this the first time I've heard that joke?
Again, it's so classic, but the one moment that got a laugh out loud out of me was spilling the wine, lifting the plate, the roast sliding off, and the dog coming in a frame and eating the roast.
Yeah.
Man, it's very classic sitcom. It's like the boss is coming to dinner and my shirt just shrank. Yeah.
I was actually surprised to rewatch the remake and see that the roast doesn't end up on the floor in the equivalent scene.
Yeah, so that's the thing about the remake, is it's actually not the worst possible case scenario.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I thought that the original was pretty good. And it's funny. Part of me wants to say it's more grounded. Like the as you said, Michael, the dad's not a CIA operative, and the stakes aren't as high, but then it's also the most fantastical entry in the series by the time we get to the end, where the mother's lost an eye, the dog's dead, and then the daughter kills herself and the dad kills everyone else by accident. Like it goes across the entire spectrum that the entire rest of the franchise nests within somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely. It runs the gamut. It starts as more mundane than Meet the Parents, and it ends as more fantastical than Meet the Parents. Also, I want to shout out to the mom and dad in the original 92 Meet the Parents, those quote unquote actors who indulged their friend's son Greg, spent their nights and weekends making this. Just good on them. There's some real the whole town pulled together to make a movie this month vibe to it. My nephew has an idea for a movie.
You should go and be in it, Grant. You'll love it. It's like, all right, okay. I'll play the dad, the most important role in the film. So neither of you had heard of Greg Gliena before this. I'm glad I'm not just, this just isn't some gap in my pop cultural knowledge. You guys never heard of him?
No, I'd say most people listening to this wouldn't either.
Okay, well, good. That's what I'm asking, because I was like, this guy, the way he's written about on Wikipedia implies he's someone I should know about, and so I looked him up, and he didn't seem to make anything else of note. He obviously got paid out for the trilogy, and he's credited as a writer for the remake.
It's characters based on kind of thing.
But his most recent directorial venture, if you're interested, was in 2013 with a film called Slut Vinka with Love from Russia. So there we go. That's what he's doing now.
I'll pass, but you go ahead.
Does it have a sequel?
Yeah, if it has a sequel, we might have to watch it.
I'll wait for the Hollywood remake version. It's worth bringing my family to.
Cool. Do you guys have any more thoughts on the original 1992 Meet the Parents before we hop along?
I just think you could do a whole investigative true crime podcast series about how is Emo Phillips connected to this? Will Emo Phillips admit he did this? Are they friends, or did Emo Phillips just take $50 to do this gig over a weekend and then forget it?
Yeah.
Because he's also in the scene at the video store. And I also want to know, frankly, how they secured the video store location. I guess by 92, video stores were already hard up and, willing to.
I bet it'll be where Greg worked.
Oh!
That's my guess, and because I've looked up, Emo Phillips and Greg Gliena are both from Chicago, So maybe they just know each other.
They
lived in
worked
the
a
same neighborhood.
blockbuster together and saw Clerks and decided they
Yeah,
could
yeah.
do
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Us
yeah.
too. Man, I love this narrative we have of this scrappy team making it. And I got to say, I wonder how rich Greg Gliena is at this point, or if that
Yeah, man.
if that set him for life or what.
Yeah, and I mean, if the franchise as a whole made $1 billion and his name is on
Yeah, and he's
the
getting residuals.
story by, yeah,
Because
God,
he is.
I hope so.
yeah.
If you go on his Facebook page, the website it links.
Add him as a friend.
You get flagged by the government on a list.
His website does not exist anymore, but it does link to his YouTube channel, which is where we watched the film.
Right.
And it's like, if you go on to the comments of it, someone's like, "How did you get a copy of this that wasn't released?" And he's like, "I made it."
All right. Okay, so now let's move on to the main trilogy of films, which started, of course, with Meet the Parents in 2000. This film was directed by Jay Roach, making this our second Jay Roach franchise that we've covered on the podcast after Austin Powers. But the studio originally offered the director role to Steven Spielberg, who was going to cast Jim Carrey as Greg Fokker. Jay Roach was offered the job after Steven Spielberg left the project, which is
Jay Roach
pretty
is the
astonishing.
name I've been fishing for this entire time. I feel bad. His name should have come into this earlier. Jay Roach, certainly an important part of translating this to film in a way that made $1 billion.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do either of you know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes, what its critic score is on Rotten Tomatoes?
Oh, gosh. No, but I'm going to venture 78%.
Yeah, I was going to say like 80-ish.
Yeah, it's got 84%, this is one of those movies where, like, if I looked it up and it had 58%, I'd be like, oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But no, 84%, I guess because it was that kind of trailblazing cringe comedy, as you were discussing before, Michael. Like, I think this is such an important movie in a lot of ways for the current landscape of comedy.
I think younger listeners won't be aware of how, because it came and went. It was like Rock Band or Dance Dance Revolution, where it had a big moment, but it passed. But the thing about I Have Nipples, Can You Milk Me was so like Anchorman spun off all these quotes that we still say to this day, and other franchises have. That was just as big. It just happened to have passed. But there was a moment where it was mind-blowing to us that Robert De Niro was talking about nipples, like specifically that it was Robert De Niro was also a big part of it. It felt like a comeback or a big change in direction. Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, but this would have been like his first big comedy role, right?
It was a second. He'd done, what's it called?
Analyze this?
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Analyze this.
On Wag the Dog.
He took this role because of Analyze This. He was like, hey, I want to do comedy. Is that a good De Niro voice?
As long as you're frowning in that weird
doing
squinty way.
That thing with your mouth where it like turns down but is also a smile. Richard, can you briefly, in a sentence or two, tell us what is Meet the Parents about? Presuming someone is listening to this having, we've already talked about the original film without discussing the story. What is it about?
So it's Greg Gaylord Fokker is it's actually Gaylord Greg Fokker, I should say. He's a nurse and he wants to propose to his girlfriend, but he finds out that his girlfriend's sister has just gotten engaged, and her family was so impressed that her fiance asked for permission first. In the old school, so he's like, fuck, okay, I've got to do that. So he goes to meet her parents for the first time. They're played by Robert De Niro and Blythe Danner. And while Blythe Danner is Dina, while she's, more or less kind of open to him, Jack, Robert De Niro's character, does not like him one bit. He does not trust him. And while nothing seems to go right for Greg, he's being watched so closely by Jack, who is, as Michael mentioned, is a former CIA operative and is using some of those kind of, techniques that he learned in the CIA to interrogate him and try and get the truth out of him. But obviously, at the end of it, everyone kind of learns. And for the first time in this series, it will come up again. But Jack learns to not be so uptight.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think this film's enduring legacy is because of the genius casting decision of Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro. Like, that's the entire film, the entire franchise is because that's such an amazing casting decision. Like, De Niro's clout kind of makes him feel like he's too good for this movie. And that's exactly the right
Not
vibe.
these days.
Yeah, no, exactly. But back in 2000, right? It's like, yeah, you get the guy who's too good to be in a dumb comedy, right? And it feels like part of me wants to believe the relationship between Greg and Jack would be as scary as the relationship between Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro.
Yeah. And in fact, almost to a fault, or at least in the first one, I do think Blythe Danner's a little underwritten, and Pam almost doesn't need to exist other than to be like, whoa, this is even more off the rails than it previously was.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, especially in the wake of talking about the original, that it didn't strike me as being this is going to be everything that could possibly go wrong, escalating to infinity, because infinity would be death, in some fashion, or at least like in the original, their relationship would fall apart, and that doesn't even happen. He doesn't even lose the relationship. It's instead your classic sitcom arc. Like if this were serialized into a sitcom, I imagine a healthy 40% of the episodes would be Jack learns to be less uptight, in little increments.
Yeah.
And it's almost a microcosm of a seasonal arc where Jack and Greg, by the end, you're feeling it's so I don't want to tie the whole franchise together when I know we're talking about them in sequence. So let's just suffice to say that unlike the first one where the dad is almost a placeholder character, off of which things can go wrong, or via which things can go wrong. Obviously, if you're putting Robert De Niro in that role, he's going to be a fully fleshed out character with his own point of view and backstory and twists and turns that relate to his character. And so instead, and again, I think to some degree of fault because all the other characters sort of take a back seat, but instead of it becoming this through line of it's all about Greg and from his point of view and it's just everything going wrong around him, it instead becomes this dual protagonist or protagonist-antagonist thing, right? Where it's Greg versus Jack. Jack hates Greg. By number 3, they're probably going to kiss each other in some wacky fashion and be best friends. But right now they hate each other, and that's what's really funny. And it is. Yeah. And I think you're right that the casting is just stellar, and casting continues to be such a driving force for this franchise. But Ben Stiller, he's got chops. I think he holds his own as well.
Yeah.
Like, especially because the fact that comedy is his genre sort of put him on an even footing with Robert De Niro, who otherwise, if it were a drama, I almost wouldn't be looking at Ben Stiller. So I think it's important that it was De Niro sort of slumming it in Ben Stiller's dojo.
Yeah. No, that's a good one.
And they hit a perfect average, which this film is. It's such a pleasant average.
I think, I really like Greg and Jack, like that they're both super imperfect people. And again, the sequels don't do this as well, but in this one, they're both, pretty shitty in different ways, and their journeys allow them both to change and both become better. And I think that's a super complex relationship for a comedy of this pedigree, that relationship that they have by the end of the film of this, like, the strict father and the clumsy idiot son-in-law, but they have this respect and this I'll say love for each other by the end of it. That
right, compared to Zoolander or Something About Mary, I actually think it's Stiller does this more as he's gotten older, but it's definitely, or I feel like it's the first major turn for him where he struck that chord of almost to me it's all wrapped up by saying that part of the enjoyment of the franchise is also the fact that they all live in homes that look like they're straight out of a catalog. Like there's an undercurrent of watching these films is pleasant to me in the same morphine drip way that it's pleasant to watch HGTV or the Great British Bake Off. So it's not edgy. In a way it's anti-edgy, which is so fascinating to me because the cringe comedy aspect then again brings me back around where I'm like, but yet it was edgy at the time. I remember thinking, this is unique, this is bizarre, I feel weird, this is different than comedy I've seen. But I just think it speaks to how much comedy is a time capsule, because this particular trend has been done so much since that I even now rewatching this franchise, it feels of an era. It feels like of one era in the past.
I totally agree, because I hadn't seen Meet the Parents since I was like 11 or 12, and I'm 27 now. So I remember at the time when I first saw Meet the Parents feeling it was so hard to watch. Like it was the cringiest thing I'd ever seen. But I got to say, the amount of cringe comedy that I've come to see in the years since watching this movie, Meet the Parents kind of feels a little tame or a little signposted. Yeah, it's something like Greg popping the champagne, which breaks the urn of Jack's mother's ashes, and then the cat running across and pooping in it. It's a very clear set of dominoes being knocked down. They're all these Chekhov's guns that are very, very succinctly and eloquently set up. You learn all these little pieces of information before they all come to a crescendo. And I think if you compare that to something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, it feels a little obvious. Like if you've seen the Michael J. Fox episode of Curb, I think that's like a masterpiece in this sort of setup, all come falling down in one go, because all the setups are very ambiguous, and that episode in particular is setups for 25 minutes, and then it all comes crashing down in a matter of seconds, And so, and compared to that, or something like The Office, like you were saying, Michael, like it feels a little... it's not as hard to watch as I remembered it was.
I mean, for me, the gold standard of this genre is the wedding episode of Peep Show. If you've seen
I
that.
have not, but
okay,
I've heard
highly recommended. But cringe comedy got to a point where, I mean, spoiler alert for that episode of a very old show at this point. Like you're literally pissing on wedding guests.
Right.
Whereas I'm trying to think, what is the worst, or eating dog is another example from Peep Show. Eating someone's dog that you killed. But what is what is the worst thing Gaylord Fokker does? Is it burn the yard or flood the yard with poo? I think
it's that
arguably
burn
the
whole
gazebo.
Wedding,
yeah.
The fire mixed with the poo.
And it is so interesting. I liken it to... I also remember playing Final Fantasy VII for the first time and thinking that computer graphics had reached their pinnacle because there was no reason to improve them further because it was like indistinguishable from life. I'm like, oh, this is photorealistic. And it's an interesting effect to... I watch it and think of it as a very enjoyable family-friendly comedy. And I remember when I watched it back in the day and I was like, I can't handle this scene in some of the scenes.
When he's on the roof.
I was like, I can't handle how much my heart is clenched.
I think so. The three, I want to talk about the three biggest improvements that I think are from the original film for the remake.
Sure.
First of all, I think Greg having an awful surname, whatever that surname may be, is so, because that's intrinsically linked to the concept of marriage and your daughter taking on a new name. So of course you make it a bad surname. And Fokker was actually Jim Carrey's idea when he was still attached to the project. And I can totally see that. I can totally see Jim Carrey sitting around in the writer's room being like, oh, what if his last name's like Fokker or something? Like it's totally, it's such a Jim Carrey idea. And I was reading that like the role of Greg Fokker had to be reduced when Ben Stiller was cast instead, because it was this physical, physical comedy role, and Ben Stiller is like the opposite of that. Ben Stiller is his funniest when he's the straight man almost, So really interesting to give him such a blatantly horrible last name. It feels like it would have it feels like it would have fit with Jim Carrey's version, and it doesn't fit with Ben Stiller's version, which is why it's such a great last name.
It gave us the Martha Fokker joke,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
was one of the favorites in my circle at the time, if I recall. But I'm also... I enjoy Jim Carrey very much, especially of a certain era, and I do think it works like Liar Liar, for example. It works really well. Jim Carrey's whole shtick, or The Mask even more so. But I don't know that I would have liked the Jim Carrey. If Jim Carrey just did his Jim Carrey thing, I think that could have overwhelmed what Robert De Niro was going to bring. And I think Ben Stiller being in this was really fortuitous for the franchise because he gave us this tone that we're describing that is, at the same time, I don't know that, certainly not to the tune of $1 billion. I don't know that the public at large, at the time this ship launched, was ready for a truly edgy, grimly dark comedy that ends with multiple murder-suicides. We are now. There are like What We Do in the Shadows, is literally about vampires and they murder people left and right. We have such a thick layer of irony that we're like, who cares? It's a joke show.
I like that after your Peep Show reference didn't land, you used one that New Zealand audiences would understand.
Would absolutely know. There we go. So anyway, in The Frighteners. No.
Hey, I live about 20 minutes from where they filmed The Frighteners, so there you go.
Well, in Meet the Feebles. No, but where was I? I just think Ben Stiller is not someone who certainly gets, I don't think, as many accolades as Jim Carrey for his comedic performances. But without Ben Stiller, this would be a completely different movie, and it's clear from the 1992 version that you combine Ben Stiller's stuttering, like, I hate using this phrase, but beta male shtick with Robert De Niro's classic "I'm watching you, I'm gonna fuck you up" shtick.
Yeah.
Oh, what a good combo, and more importantly, what a combo that the whole family can enjoy in the year 2000. It is truly edgy and transgressive, but not so far. It's clearly a stepping stone on the way to the comedies of today, and I love that about it.
I think there's a repressed kind of nature to Ben Stiller that really works, because if you're putting yourself in a scenario where you're meeting your partner's parents for the first time, you're holding a lot back, and I think Jim Carrey yelling and falling down and all this kind of stuff, it would have been funny to watch, I'm sure, but the Ben Stiller's way of not wanting to really overreact to anything, I think works so well.
Yeah.
Literally the climactic scene we were talking about where he floods the yard with the septic tank and falls from the roof. Jim Carrey would have nailed that scene, and I think hurt every other scene.
Yeah, I can't imagine the milking a cat scene, and you mentioned it before, but my God, one of the last iconic movie lines of the 20th century, and it's the best one. I have nipples, Greg. Can you milk me?
Yeah.
I mean, my God, what a perfect.
It encompasses the
Perfect
film.
line.
That's the worst thing your father-in-law could say to you. So I'm really enjoying all this talk about who Greg is as a character, because that funnels into my second thing that I think is an improvement on the original, is the decision to make Greg's career a male nurse, and a male nurse by choice as well. It's well established in the film that he had the opportunity to become a doctor and stayed being a nurse. Because it, of course, plays into the joke that men shouldn't be nurses, but it was also kind of praised at the time by a lot of people for being quite a progressive idea, because Greg himself never at any point shows any he's not insecure about being a male nurse. It's everyone else around him that seems to have a problem with it, and so I think especially with Jack being, I'm presuming, a conservative Republican type of character, it's a knife in his side, I think, and in such a great way. It's along with Fokker.
And especially, it's worth mentioning as well that Debbie, Pam's sister, is getting married to a doctor. So that's kind of the thing that it's he's going and he's already asked for permission to marry Jack's daughter, and now he's wanting to go do the same, but in almost every way, Jack sees him as an inferior version of Dr. Bob.
Yeah, exactly.
In an objective way. I noticed that for the first time on this rewatch, and I do actually like that. It's like if one were an executive president and one were an executive vice president. It's such an interesting facet of comedy as a time capsule, because comedy so often plays with what is taboo and transgressive. Let's talk about that, flirt with that line. And thus it has to be like very fluent in the details of what is cheeky to say, but not all the way over the line to that it's just obscene and upsetting and offensive. That's a very detailed place to land, and that's why comedy is hard, and it's also why comedy is so specific to the time and place and culture in which it was created. And you see this happen so frequently, but I think that stood out to me the most as dating the movie immediately. In terms of, I don't think anyone in Gen Z would even know. You'd have to explain to them, oh, nursing was like,
totally.
Jack thinks that he's feminine because he's a nurse.
And that'd be like,
oh, that's
what's
weird.
wrong with being feminine?
Or is that, what's the problem? Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, and that was progressive at the time because, see, Greg doesn't even care. And they're like, yeah, why would anyone care about that?
Absolutely. And the third thing I think is an improvement is Jack being ex-CIA. All these elements swirl together to create, like, they're superficial additions, but they allow for the tension to start very early on. Before the urn gets shattered, before, Greg flushes the broken toilet, it's like right from the start, Jack finds out that his last name is Fokker and that he's a male nurse, and then you find out that Jack used to be in CIA. And so it eases you in very, very comfortably, I think, into what the kind of movie it is going to be. And I also really like that Greg's name is Gaylord. I think, again, in a way that could very easily, in the year 2000, be a cheap gay joke, it kind of doesn't feel like the joke is on... Like, it doesn't feel like the joke is homophobic. It feels like the characters who think that's funny are homophobic. And, after all of this, because you find out his name is Gaylord after he's been banished from the family. And so it's like the icing on the cake that he's also named Gay Fokker.
Yeah. And because there's also, about the last name Fokker, there's like a famous behind-the-scenes story that the MPAA wouldn't let them... use that name unless they could prove that someone existed in the United States with that last name.
Yeah, exactly. Which also came into play.
And presumably they did?
Yeah.
And there is? Good to know.
It's not entirely uncommon, but it was a bigger deal with the sequel, of course, because that had to be in the title. So they had to definitively prove that Fokker was not an inappropriate word, so they could put it in the title.
Wow.
So I think that the Meet the Parents franchise, at least for me, is a great example of the sum of the parts being better than the whole. And this is especially true of the sequels. But even the first film, I think, loses some of its purity as more family members and characters turn up, like Owen Wilson, who plays Kevin, who's Pam's ex, and the setups get a bit more lavish. And I think the worst-case scenario of meeting your girlfriend's parents is such a great movie premise, but I think that... it'd be stronger if it focused more on the scariest father-in-law eyeing up the clumsiest son-in-law. But by the end, it's sort of like the whole family hates him and the extended family hate him. And I don't know, part of me wants that to be saved for the sequel, is the extended family hating, like right. I want that purity of the pure dynamic of the son-in-law and the parents in the first one almost, I think.
I agree. They try to have their cake and eat it too a bit, in the sense that they have Blythe Danner have little arcs, like she's not getting it enough in bed from Jack is clearly her thing that comes up a few times. But all the characters other than De Niro and Stiller are slightly underwritten. So may as well do what you're doing and just go all in on it. And Ben Stiller is crappy Batman and or a sheepish Joker, and Bobby D is Batman that's gonna wreck your shit and ruin your relationship. I think if they remade this franchise now, they probably would go that way, and the poster would just be them in profile angry at each other. But it's also trying to be that Christmas movie that you take the whole family to. So I think there's some appeal to that idea of you all gather for the holidays and it's crazy. Your family is shenanigans. I think that's that's appealing to the holiday profit corridor, so to speak.
Yeah. I read this on multiple outlets, and I don't have any more information. I couldn't find any more information. But apparently the role of Pam was initially given to Naomi Watts, but she ultimately lost the role to Terry Polo because the filmmakers did not think she was sexy enough. Now, let's quickly acknowledge that that's a shitty thing to say to someone. But also, the role of Pam needs to be sexy enough. Like that's what struck me there. And also, Naomi Watts wasn't sexy enough. Like, these are such strange things that have been thrown out in that little piece of trivia I couldn't find any more information on.
Yeah.
There you go. Is Meet the Parents the last great airport hijinks movie pre 9/11? This is my question, because this movie came out in 2000, right? And there's a very famous scene where he gets taken in by airport security because he's talking about a bomb, in the sense that he doesn't have a bomb. And one of the main jokes I remember from this film is him saying, "I can say bomb all I want, bomb, 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 bomb." I very much enjoyed that the last time I saw this movie, and I enjoyed it again. But on July 18th in 2005, there was a flight to Puerto Rico which had to be diverted back to Fort Lauderdale because the pilot, because the flight attendant found a crumpled napkin that read "bomb, bomb, bomb, ... meet the parents." And so that was left on the plane, and so they had to turn the plane back around.
Wait. Why was someone writing that?
I don't know, but it's...
They just wanted to remember. Maybe they had a podcast they were doing later and they wanted to remember that line.
Well,
That's weird.
I can't be blamed because I was much too young to be doing that in 2000. We have a segment on our show, Michael, called Dumb IMDb Trivia, where we talk about the IMDb trivia for the various films we cover. IMDb trivia is user submitted, so often it's written with like an unnecessary authorial voice, or it's not trivia, or it's wrong. So we try to compile these, and I've got some dumb IMDb trivia for the first Meet the Parents film here.
Great.
So this is the first piece of dumb IMDb trivia. This is the only film in the trilogy in which Pam's sister Deborah Burns appears on screen, though she is frequently mentioned in all of the films. Nicole DeHuff, the actress who played her, died in 2005. This explains her absence in Little Fockers, 2010, but not Meet the Fockers in 2004. There's a conspiracy theory angle to that that's like, okay, did the producers of Meet the Fockers know she was going to die? Like,
yeah, or maybe Little Fockers was in development for so long that and then they found out they cut her role from it, and they killed her.
Wow.
Yeah, now that she's dead, they just want us to know they also passed. No. Before she died, we passed. No.
Jack's knowledge of NATO's standard phonetic alphabet, Foxtrot, Oscar, Charlie, Kilo, Echo, Romeo, aka Fokker, is all accurate, as it would be, since Robert De Niro is a stickler for detail. It's like the most basic, like, phonetic alphabet thing you can...
Also, I'm assuming the screenwriter looked it up on, accurately and transcribed it.
Yeah.
And this would have been post Bloodhound Gang, Foxtrot Uniform Charlie Kilo, I think, as well. So
yeah.
I feel
you only need to change one letter.
Yeah. I feel like that's a very well-documented fact, but no, it's because Robert De Niro is specifically a stickler for detail. And my final piece of dumb IMDb trivia for Meet the Parents. The premise of Meet the Parents is about truth and lies. The scene where Jack meets Greg for the first time, Jack says, "It's my way or the Long Island Expressway." This, of course, abbreviates to LIE, and abbreviates is what's written on IMDb. And it's claiming that the premise of Meet the Parents is like so It's about specifically the word lie, the spelling of the word lie.
Right.
That the
Long Island Expressway.
That is right, which has a W at the end of it. So it's not lie, it's a lie. So yeah, that is the...
And De Niro, so by saying my way, De Niro has set up the duality of his way is truth
and lies. Very good.
unassailable truth.
Well, because he's a
Okay.
stickler for details.
Yeah, exactly. And that...
So really the film is about the CIA as like the upstanding moral authority
course.
and central truth that protects us from the vagaries of the world. All hail the one world government.
How many Jack Burns types do you think saw this movie and was like, I don't see what's wrong with this. This is all...
Yeah.
This is fine.
Well, misappropriation of company equipment, I would assume. Because Jack
true,
also... I liked in the third one that they finally call him on it, that they're like, your access codes don't
Yeah.
hold water anymore,
You have
sir.
no
The
power
CIA
here."
is not your closet to raid.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move forward to 2004, where we're going to talk about Meet the Fockers. This came out, 2004. Is also directed by Jay Roach. Do y'all know what it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Ooh, I'm going to guess it has diminishing returns, even though I actually like this one just as much. I think it's pretty good. So I'm going to guess 69. Nice.
Hey.
Yeah.
Richard, do you want to guess? I challenge you, Richard, to guess an even funnier number than that. You can't be done.
1 million.
That's pretty funny.
No, I'm gonna guess it's not going to be fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So sub 60.
Yeah, it's 38%, so nowhere near
Wow.
nowhere near
Less
as
than
funny as 69 in my opinion. And Michael, would you be able to tell us in a sentence or two what happens? What's this one about?
Okay. Googling. No, wait, I remember.
I have a
Well,
backup synopsis if you can't do it.
I watched them back to back to back, and they do kind of become a blur. But actually, I'm recalling the beats, and it's linking up in my head of like what makes sense, especially from the title. Meet the Fockers is the one where they meet Dustin Hoffman and Barbara Streisand. So it's meet the other parents, essentially, which is a very sensible way for the thing to go. And how could the blending of the two families go as horribly as possible? Well, of course, if Jack is famously uptight, we're going to find out that the Fockers are completely wild, from his vantage, sex maniacs, but we would call them just like in touch with their seniors who are still in touch with their sexuality. Barbara's a sex therapist, and Dustin Hoffman, I forget their names.
Bernard and Roz. Yeah.
That's right. So they essentially all spend the weekend together and get to know each other and work out their kinks. And Bernie and Roz learn to like tone it down one notch. And hey, guess what? Jack learns to be a little less uptight.
Yeah, that's great. And it's also set in Florida. There's another.
Yes, right at the Fokker ancestral estate or household. Yeah.
So, all right. So, what did you guys think of this movie, Michael? You said that you like it just as much.
I do like it. It felt to me, or I guess, look, Rotten Tomatoes, if you're gonna stand here and if you don't love me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Not to say the Rotten Tomatoes should give all movies a blank check, but I would argue if you're in for the premise and the execution of Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers is that again in the most sensible way. It's the same way the MCU handles things. You add 2 more heavy hitters, you expand. If it were a Batman movie, it's like the next one has 3 villains instead of 1. And in this franchise, that just means 3 comedy heavy hitters who each represent a bag of jokes and a bag of bits. And I have to say, all the heavy hitters, they share screen time pretty equally. You get the same arc again between Greg and Jack, but you also get Dustin Hoffman doing his shtick, which I find legitimately amusing, and Barbara Streisand getting to do her thing, which I find legitimately amusing. I think it's actually pretty impressive that they were able to fill out a roster within this universe and have it work. Now, I will say one of the trade-offs that seem similar again to what you get when you have a superhero film and you add more characters or more villains, is it becomes sort of diffuse and decentralized.
Yeah.
So the sheer acute pain of how uncomfortable this must be for Greg is sort of lost in the mix because we're not really riding with Greg 100% of the time. It's we're more of a fly on the wall, buzzing around, just looking at. It has already become a sitcom. It felt a lot homier, and it felt like we love Jack already because we've already seen him through the whole arc of the first movie. So they're all family now.
Yeah.
There's no threat that the relationship will actually fall apart. So the real question becomes, what can you do, Dustin Hoffman?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Absolutely.
And he does some funny stuff, and I think they all do. But it doesn't feel cringy anymore. It just feels like a zany family, frankly.
Dude, my flatmate watched this movie with me. He used the exact same terminology. He said, this one is just zany. He used the word zany. Richard, what did you think of Meet the Fockers?
I put them on pretty equal footing as well. But I think both of these films I had seen a while ago, I hadn't seen for a long time, and then coming back to them, I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, these movies are awesome. And then by the end of them, I was kind of like, oh yeah, now I've seen this. And maybe it's a little bit of the cringe comedy evolving so much since then, and kind of obviously. A lot of those kind of Chekhov's guns you mentioned and things like that, when they're so obviously set up and you know where they're going, there's not as much of the payoff. But also with both films have their flaws as well, and they're in kind of different places. I found that Meet the Fockers, it feels like they were writing this by hand and they realized that they got to the end of like the book they were writing in, like, fuck, we have 5 pages left. And then just wrapped the film up really quickly because it comes to a climax, and rather than resolving it really, it just cuts to the wedding and everything's fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like there's
and they even lean on the bit of apologies, but they lean on the bit of Owen Wilson as he's officiating is still keeping alive the bit to a degree that you're like, it seems like this is still going to be a problem in the future.
Yeah. So I think this we've watched quite a few same movie but in a different location sequels on our podcast. And if this counts as that, I dare say this is one of the most effective ones.
Yeah.
I think it's genius to characterize Greg's parents as these super liberal, sex positive, loose people. It's such an obvious way to milk more out of De Niro's character. I did not mean that to be a pun. Until I read it back and then was like, oh, whatever, I'll leave it in there. Dustin Hoffman and Barbra Streisand are, I think, easily the strongest part of the film, if only because I've seen Robert De Niro do this already. And the interplay between the two of them and De Niro, I think, justifies this sequel's existence.
Yeah, it's very like, it's one of those things where if this was a huge franchise and, every 4 or 5 years they'd make another one and it's like, oh, what too good for this franchise people are they going to cast in this? And then in the third one, I guess you could say it's Laura Dern and Harvey Keitel, just because getting
Alba.
like serious actors. But there's a fun thing of like just building this like quite impressive cast. And it's the same kind of thing that they did with like the Bad Moms and Daddy's Home movies.
Yeah.
They just like bring in like these quite respected actors to do these kind of dumb movies.
Yeah. I also think that adding Little Jack, who is the Burns' nephew, is great fodder for Stiller to continue being a dumbass. Without a baby in this movie, Ben Stiller's got very little to do. And, of course, he glues alcohol to the baby's hands by accident.
Of course.
And teaches him to say, asshole, which is like the one thing I remembered from this movie.
Kid does a pretty solid asshole, yeah.
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 Comedic asshole. Well, it's twofold. A baby always raises the stakes. Did they add a gun? No, I don't think there's any gunplay in the second one. No. So the baby's the other way to raise the stakes. And of course, we're introducing the new generation of Fockers, which will come into play in the future. You got to lay the pipe.
exactly.
Well, that's how babies are made.
I guess that's how you get it. Yeah.
They're also worth mentioning is that there's a plot line in this where De Niro believes that, Jack believes that Greg already sired a son in Ray Santiago's, what's his name? Jorge? Something like that?
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's a whole thing about how Greg lost his virginity to their Spanish housemaid, and there's a 15-year-old Spanish boy who looks remarkably like Ben Stiller moving around.
I like growing up, I always thought that was him in brownface.
Thank God it wasn't.
Thankfully not. But there's every episode of the series, so to speak, has one core misunderstanding between Jack and Greg that could be easily resolved if they just like talked it out in the right way, but they don't.
Yeah.
And that's probably my favorite one, I think.
Yeah. I think it's one of the strongest parts of the movie is that part, yeah. I think, unfortunately, in my opinion, I think it is a little bit derivative, I think, of the first one especially. I think it's a lot more outlandish as well. Jack drugs Greg with truth serum at one point because he thinks he's lying to him, and then Greg of course makes a fool of himself in front of a bunch of people, and it feels a little less relatable and also a little less realistic. Like the champagne urn thing from the first one is like all these things are relatively...
We've all done it.
No, but they're all inconsequential circumstances that we've all done.
Right, but in this one, like you have the RV that has a command center within it. They've definitely escalated the CIA tropes one level of zaniness for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what that Rotten Tomato score is all about, is how derivative it is, which it is. It's an exercise in a sequel that didn't strictly need to exist, but I would just argue that if you took out the fact that it's derivative of the first one, it's just as good as the first one, which is a weird thing to say.
I argue that about The Hangover.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I also think that it is bizarre that someone as stringent as Jack would bring his prized pet cat with him on a weekend on the other side of the country. And this is clearly just a setup for the scene where Jinx the cat flushes the Fockers Chihuahua Moses down the toilet. Like, it's like they want that scene, but it's like, oh, why would we bring a cat to Florida?
I would say, of course, he'd bring the cat.
Really?
Doesn't trust anyone else to watch it. Maybe.
Yeah, if the cat wasn't in this film, I would have been like, where's the cat?
All right. Fair enough.
I would think that he would have a series of sensors and cameras, and at any time he could like check in on Jinxie via satellite phone or whatever.
Yeah. I think, though, the worst thing about this film is that Jack is so clearly in the wrong, way more than he was in Meet the Parents, where it was like, well, Greg did lie about saving Jinxie and that sort of thing. And this...
Hey, well, he painted his tail. Yeah. That's one of the my favorite ends of,
Yeah.
Much cleaner than you made our daughter hang herself. I'll tell you what else does. It reminds me a lot of King of the Hill, because King of the Hill is a show that I didn't appreciate enough as a kid, but now as an adult I love so much. And one of their main sources of humor is a character literally just saying the premise of the episode, like, look, you can dance with your dog in the bedroom. Bobby will dance with his dog in the garage. Everyone gets to dance with a dog. And I love how many lines in this series they give Robert De Niro, where Robert De Niro, the meticulous way he speaks as scripted is honestly brilliant, where he's like, but Gregory, you have painted the tip of the tail of my cat. Like, the precise way he talks is just a well that I can go back to indefinitely.
Well, this movie, Meet the Fockers, made me realize how good of an actor Robert De Niro is. Like, I already knew, I guess.
Really commits to it. He's great.
So I always assume when I'm watching a relatively late stage Robert De Niro film, especially like I've started doing comedies era Robert De Niro,
right.
I always assume he's going to have the same lack of passion that a lot of other once great actors have.
Morgan Freeman.
Bruce Willis,
Yeah, totally. But I feel like De Niro respects the script no matter what he's in, and he buys in 100% whether it's The Irishman or Meet the Fockers, Like he is
absolutely.
He's so in the film.
He's an actor's actor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really impressive. And this is our second franchise in which Robert De Niro either plays or says someone looks like a young Marlon Brando, because we've done the Godfather trilogy very recently. And when I think Greg is compared to Marlon Brando at one point, and then when Jack sees this young kid that looks like Ben Stiller, he also says he looks like a young Marlon Brando. Cool. So we got some dumb IMDb trivia for Meet the Fockers. Here it comes. When the first film and the sequel. Sorry, this is written really poorly because it's IMDb trivia.
That's the fun of it.
When the first film and this sequel, while hugely successful, failed to raise Terry Polo's profile as an actress, she posed for Playboy the following year. And I just feel like
to Google,
we're given
this franchise did not serve its female stars. I gotta say
that's true. But I feel like this is not necessarily. This is like a correlation, not causation thing, where it's like,
sure,
Terry Polo maybe did Playboy. I don't think it's fair to be like, oh, because Meet the Parents failed to skyrocket. And I've also got here.
But you do feel sorry for her when like you've got like a core cast of 6 people, and it's Robert De Niro, Blythe Danner, Dustin Hoffman, Barbra Streisand, Ben Stiller, and Terry Polo. Meet the Parents as Terry Polo.
Yeah. Here's a really fun one. Get ready for this. Little Jack says asshole 9 times. The most said from a minor in a DreamWorks film.
DreamWorks specific. I would assume any film, probably.
I want to see DreamWorks beat that record.
Shrek 5, come on.
And lastly, Roz Fokker, Barbra Streisand, gives Jack, Robert De Niro, a massage where he lies shirtless on a massage table, and she rubs his back and then runs her hands down under his belly. After doing that a few times, she says, oops, hit some driftwood, in parentheses, an erection joke. Coincidence is, Barbra Streisand acted in Maurice de Tedun's play Driftwood in New York in 1959. It's all connected. Driftwood is a clear reference.
God. Wow. I assumed that one, just from the way it was written, was going to end with, I have to stop writing now. My hands are busy doing other things. Someone's really into that scene.
I have to go now. My penis needs me.
Alrighty, moving forward to 2010, we had Little Fockers. This was directed by Paul Weitz, and this is our third Paul Weitz franchise after American Pie and The Nutty Professor. And we actually interviewed his brother about a couple of years ago, Chris Weitz.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and we never met Paul, though, so I don't feel bad dunking on...
never met Chris either.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't feel as bad dunking on Little Fockers because I haven't talked to the director in person, whereas I have talked to his brother. Because this has... what do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
10.
Oh, okay. The number 16 floated up from the abyss of my mind, so 16.
This has 9% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
It's such a low number. What is this movie about? Do you want me to take this one since you guys have each taken one?
Yeah, God.
Sure, but at first I just want to say I do think there's diminishing returns from critics when a franchise that is broad and family friendly makes too much money.
Right.
I would argue that these scores are too low for the numbers 2 and 3, but they're just bitter.
Yeah.
They're just bitter that something that's fine to good is making all the money in the world. But go ahead.
So, 5 years after the events of Meet the Fockers, Gaylord Greg Fokker is preparing to celebrate his twins Samantha and Henry's 5th birthday. Things seem to go awry when Greg's father-in-law Jack Burns visits. That's what I think I just googled Little Fockers synopsis, and I want to challenge that because I don't. Are they 5 in this? Are the twins 5? They seem a bit older.
It's their 5th birthday they're celebrating.
It is. They seem very old for 5. This is a very hard film to summarize in terms of talking what it's about because when
there's a few plot lines.
Yeah, it's not as neat as what's Meet the Parents about. It's in the title. What's Meet the Fockers about? Or if you know what the series is, it's in the title. What's Little Fockers about? It's complicated. So when the film was announced, writer John Hamburg stated that the film would deal with themes of death and divorce and all these real things that as we get older, we start to think think about, but in a really comical way. So that's how the writer describes what the movie is about, which sounds like it's once again about
Bodes
nothing.
well.
Yeah, well, because also, like, I believe wasn't Dustin Hoffman supposed to be killed off originally? So maybe there would have been more of that dealing with death, because they don't really deal with death in the film.
No, he was killed. He was going to be killed off because Dustin Hoffman is one of those actors who's like, no, you have to pay me this amount for me to be in this movie. And then he eventually agreed to do it.
That's all actors, really. I mean, they all have salaries.
Yeah, that's true.
I was surprised they get him in like a scene and a half.
Yeah, and I think he wrote a lot of the scenes he was in as well. Because that's
or just improvise. I want to do flamenco. Fly me to Spain. That's my price.
Yeah. I think this one is immediately worse than the previous two. I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just interested because I like saw the first two when they came out, and this one was like they made another one of those, and I didn't even contemplate seeing it.
Yeah.
But Michael, had you seen this one before?
No, and I had seen the other two in their theatrical run, so it's same deal.
Yeah.
I assumed, and I think it's all about the feeling you go in with, right? If I had paid money to see this in theaters, I would talk at length about how my money was squandered on this movie and all of its flaws, which I'm happy to elucidate. But I think since I saw it so that I could have fun talking to you guys on this podcast, and I didn't spend money on it, and I hadn't seen it before, and I just watched it at home, and I assumed it had a 16 on Rotten Tomatoes or worse, a 9, and I assumed it was Drek. I'm actually coming from a place where I'm like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Wow. Okay.
And yet I'm still noting, I mean, it was bad though. There's all these reasons it was bad. Not the least of which is that the moment where because like at this point, like you said, it's more just about the universe of Meet the Parents is established, I guess. And these are just our characters and just stuff is going to happen to them. And it's the classic beat where Jack and Greg are friends. They're super tight actually, but something's going to threaten it. I actually thought they played the all is lost moment where the friendship is almost sacrificed so dark and hard that it's weird that they could make up again. Like Jack really is like, I never cared about you. I called Bob the Bob Fucker or whatever, the Bob Father. Yeah. And it's all shit. And I actually think that you're a scumbag. And like, it's really weirdly, it's interesting that quote you read because it is tonally, it almost circled back to the 1992 version where it's almost too grim and dark and edgy because they escalated their way to edgy and they forgot that this movie's about having heart. Like I mean, it has the thing where the third one is right. The one where the kid draws the drawing and they're like, I saw Daddy sticking a needle in Grandpa's penis. That's hardcore. That's like a Mr. Show sketch. And that doesn't feel like Meet the Parents to me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I see what you mean.
It is funny though. I'm glad you mentioned the because I'd forgotten about the Bob father and the whole thing about that. It's like, and once I saw in the movie, I remembered it from the trailer that it's like, it is him dealing with reaching the end of his life, and his legacy. It's very The Irishman in that way that it's Robert De Niro reflecting on the legacy he's leaving behind. But and then he calls Greg and says like, I need you to be the Godfucker. And it's such a like someone in 2007 or 8 woke up in the middle of the night and was like Godfucker and wrote the whole movie based around that joke.
Yeah. No, I agree. I actually I think that this movie feels like it was 2 or 3 spec scripts for the coveted third Meet the Parents films that got crashed together with no rhyme or reason. And I think the titles, lend credence to that because Little Fockers, as a title, that feels like it should be about Greg dealing with his twins, one of whom is gifted and one of whom isn't.
I will say though that the phrase Little Fockers is used in the first film.
Right.
That
true.
Jack says, oh, you get a couple of little fuckers running around, and then blah blah blah. blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought from the title, especially given how informative the previous titles have been, I agree that it was going to be Meet the Parents, the Next Generation. Like I thought this would introduce the kids. So we've introduced the parents on both sides as viable characters. What if the kids are actually full-fledged characters? What if the camera pans down to the kids' table and we learn about the little fuckers who are going to destined to carry us through the next 9 movies in this franchise?
It's like Ben Stiller's face CGI'd on a baby.
Yeah, exactly. And he lost his virginity to a giant baby, we find out, and that's why it came out this way. But yeah, instead it is just, I mean, Blythe Danner, her arc is the same again as it was in the second one. It's just trying to spice up the marriage with Jack again. It's weird. It feels like it got die-harded, I agree. Spec scripts mashed together into a thing, and they're like, one more for the road? Why not?
Yeah, because presumably there was another script titled The Godfucker, right? Like that feels like the title of the film, and that film is about Jack putting pressure on Greg to step up and take over the Burns legacy. And the previous films in the series are so concise with their logline that for a movie called Little Fockers, it's not the kids are barely
the kind of main driving force behind it is the extramarital thing with Andy Garcia. That's not, they have some fun with this, but that's not the actor Andy Garcia. That's Jessica Alba playing Andi Andy Garcia.
Right.
Yeah. Who is a what role? What's her job?
She's like a pharmaceutical rep.
Yeah, and she's got a inexplicably has a crush on Ben Stiller.
Her job is to seduce Ben Stiller at all costs. She is
one of the many several of the like thankless roles that Jessica Alba landed in this time period.
Yeah,
right?
She's just a temptress.
Always doing that.
Yeah, good luck, Chucks, Jessica Alba.
Yeah, it's so sad. I hope Jessica Alba has like an albinescence. I feel
it's like someone just kindly directed me to an interview because I was curious about this, where Sam Rockwell said like, No, I'm sick of saying the N-word in every role I get. I'm going to stop doing it. It's getting old.
Yeah. No, I get that.
I feel that too.
I feel that every role.
God.
God.
Every podcast, Jesus.
I think that something this movie unintentionally does, but it does it effectively, is it's a little bit sad to see Jack at this point in his life where like after all this he's still able to like lose trust completely in Greg. Like
that's
Greg comes
it.
off,
that's it. That he could go all the way to a full reset where he doesn't value Greg at all anymore. You're like, what did we come so far for?
And he's completely forgotten how to not be uptight.
It implies a little bit of like dementia, like it has that energy to it, that it's like Jack is like regressing to his emotional
the parents
states.
era self. Yeah. He's just wandering around the halls at night trying to milk himself. People are worried about him.
Because Greg comes off as so much more mature and level-headed in this film. He winds up accidentally having Jessica Alba kiss him, but it's very much not really his fault. It's just sort of
and they are spending the night together in a ditch with her undressed lying on top of him. But it's not what it looks like.
Yeah, but Jack is just an elderly man who's losing his mind in this film, and it's depressing. It's depressing to think that Greg still needs to win his trust back, and it feels less like he should do that and more like he should sit his kids down and be like, now kids, that Grandpa Jack is pretty old now and he has some pretty funny ideas and he'll say some pretty silly things. You just need to remember that it's because he's old,
They should have revealed he only ever was really a florist, and all the CIA stuff is just stuff he bought at Sharper Image in this fake life he's built in his head.
Yeah, like instead of your security clearance has expired, it's like, how did you get this number? You've never worked for the CIA.
Who are you, sir? Do you need help? Can someone pick you up?
But he's still replying like everyone else in the room hears him replying as if he was on the phone to an operative. But then you hear the other side of the call and it's like, we're going to call the ambulance for you, okay?
Sorry, hold on. I have to go write some IMDb trivia real quick. It's all coming together.
Once again, logic is defied, and I'll be interested to see what you think of this occasion, Richard, because Jinxie is once again brought just into the very open space that is the kids' birthday party, along with the Focker's pet lizard, and they just assume they put on the ground and they roam free. A lizard roams free in like a paddock. And
Well,
they're
to
just like,
be fair,
we'll be
that's
fine.
the fucking dumbass little kid. So
Yeah,
that's
true.
like, they would do that. But yeah, Jinxie, I mean,
But would you give your dumbass little kid his pet lizard at his birthday party?
Well,
where
if
he's
I was
more
a
concerned with
dumbass
jumping on a
fucker, I
bouncy
would.
castle?
I think there's also the thing with Jinxie. It's like I believe that Jack takes it everywhere. You know,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Also, how old is Jinxie at this point, do we reckon? That was my first question.
But you'd also think, based on the harness, the boob harness from the second one, that he would have some kind of cat backpack or some
Yeah.
contraption. He seems like the type that would have a
Yeah.
cat swaddled
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
his chest or something.
Yeah. The one thing I really liked about this movie is the climax of the film, where so essentially Jack sees Jessica Alba pushing herself onto Greg and presumes that Greg's cheating, and so at the end of the film, Greg goes to like offer Jack a piece of cake as like a peace offering because they've had a fight, and Jack punches him in the face and they have a fist fight. And I thought this was such an obvious and great place to take these characters. Too late in the franchise to take them there. This almost feels like it's a beat missing from the first film. You know, like surely
yeah.
the ultimate worst case scenario comedy should probably peak with the son-in-law crossing that sacred boundary of punching the father.
I don't know.
Right. And if you get to injecting the father-in-law's penis, you've gone too far. The fist fight is enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I it kind of worked for me as like a end of the third film, three films of like culminating together. You know, if they had ended in a fist fight at the end of the first film, I would have thought that would be too soon in their relationship. And you know, you'd be dating for someone for less than a year, and then they get into a fist fight with your dad. Like, that's gonna fuck up your relationship a bit. But if you've got kids, you've got 3 movies worth of showing what an asshole your dad is, then you know it's somewhat believable, I think.
Did you guys like it that they had a fist fight?
I did. Yeah, I did.
I like the idea that they would have a fist fight, but I feel that it did come late. I wish it had come earlier, only because of the other aspect where I actually found myself happy that Jack and Greg were friends, and then it felt like that was stolen from me just for the sake of the third movie having something to do. Where I was like, don't negate that they like each other. They like each other. Or that was the reality I was ready to. I'm like, we already established this in 2 movies. They're friends now. Don't make that the movie.
I
find something else.
See, I almost feel like though that they get into a fist fight because of that friendship. It's like, and because they're so close at the start of the film, or you know, like relatively anyway, that the perceived like cheating that he's doing is such a more betrayal to
That
Jack.
is something that could break up the relationship.
And also like and I feel like you'd almost be more likely to get into a fight like that with your friend than like someone you actually genuinely hate. And so I think there's something there. But I like, and so when Jack lands that first punch, I was like, oh fuck yeah, like this is where you take this relationship. And then Michael, I don't know if you've seen the movie Fist Fight with Charlie Day and Ice Cube.
No, I haven't.
It's not a very good movie, but it's
2 out of 10 movie for the first 3/4.
That's our Fight Club.
But it so delivers on its premise of like, here's 2 grown men who are going to have a fight by the end of this movie. And the third act, when they actually have the fight, is hilarious. It's incredible. And
one of the best scenes of 2016 or whatever the movie came out.
Because AJ and I went to see it together, and it was like a very late night screening, only movie on at the time, and we were kind of like, oh, you get through it. But then by the end of it, we're like cheering, and I was hoping something that was that well thought out and staged.
Oh, the Charlie Day one. No, I haven't watched that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Just watch the fist fight and know that it's been building up to this. And it's a great scene. It's a truly great scene.
I'll give it a watch.
And I desperately wish it were in a better movie.
Yeah, but that almost kind of makes it good that it's like, there's this really good scene and just such a boring movie.
Yeah. And yeah, I definitely got fist fight flashbacks watching the fight scene in Little Fockers. And also, I do want to point out when Robert De Niro, his acting when he sees what he thinks is Greg cheating, it's really good. It's really heartbreaking.
And he's got his little old man cap on.
Yeah, and it is the look of someone whose friend has betrayed them as well.
Yeah.
Which, what you were saying, Richard, like adds to it quite well. And then this is sort of resolved because I like the double beat that Greg catches the cat who's eating the lizard while he's like helping Jack who's like having a heart attack. And so he proves to Jack that he can be the Godfucker. He can take care of his family, you know. It's a very heroic thing. And then also it's real funny that the reason Jack believes Greg didn't cheat is because he doesn't his like, what is it, like the vein on his neck wasn't convulsing.
Yeah, he's checked his pulse.
Right, yeah. So, but in a headlock.
Yeah.
So very, very fun stuff. All right. Apparently, during his Lifetime Achievement Award speech at the Golden Globes, Robert De Niro stated, "I was very, very moved and gratified when you made the announcement of this award 2 months ago, well before any of you had the chance to review Little Fockers."
Yeah. That's not apparently. I've seen the speech, and it's very funny that
Really?
he said that.
Okay. That's great. Some dumb IMDb trivia for Little Fockers. This is maybe one of my favorite pieces of dumb IMDb trivia I've ever read. And we'll break it down together. This is how it goes. The first collaboration with Robert De Niro and Jessica Alba for the first time since Machete 2010. Now, let's break this down. 1, a collaboration between Robert De Niro and Jessica Alba is apparently something that's of note. That's noteworthy. 2, they say first twice. The first collaboration for the first time. And second, Machete also came out in 2010. They came out in the same year, and it's like the first collaboration since something
Since
that
a couple of
happened
months
earlier
ago.
this year. Yeah. So really enjoy that one.
We need a classic energy pairing, you know, like an Alba De Niro sort of picture.
And when Jack Googles Andy Garcia for the first time, he comes across the actor of the same name. That's a piece of trivia.
Trivia.
Yeah, it's just
Not explicitly
That's
in the
the
text of the
joke.
film.
Yeah.
That's a piece of trivia. Yeah. So do you guys have any more thoughts on Little Fockers before we move on to discussing the franchise as a whole?
Let's check it out.
Check it
Yeah.
out.
Maybe it's just that I'm 35. Maybe it's the catchiness of the word sustango. But this movie marks the first time I was like, maybe I will try one of those dick pills recreationally.
I
No,
did
thinking
find
about
out
it.
recently that, and I might have actually said this on the podcast before, but apparently Viagra doesn't give you a boner. It's like you have to get one yourself, but it just helps you maintain it.
Forget it, Dad.
Yeah, fuck that.
I gotta get my own boners like a peasant.
That's the worst part. Keeping it's fine. I can do that.
It's the getting.
All right, we talk about titles a lot on this podcast, Michael, so much that we made a segment called We Talk About Titles a Lot on this podcast. And I want to talk about the Meet the Parents titles because there's a very clear outlier, which anyone who's listened to this and knows how much of a stickler I am for consistency in titles will know it's probably coming up. But first I want to say Meet the Parents, perfect title. Because it's a ubiquitous, generic term, of course you call the film that, right? Meet the Fockers, of course. What a great title for the sequel. And I feel like they were so close to calling the third film Meet the Little Fockers, but because no one actually meets them for the first time in the film, except us, the audience, which I think that would have counted. You know, I would have taken that.
Yeah.
I think if they had doubled down on the gifted school storyline, it would truly be like we are meeting who the Little Fockers are.
It was called Meet the Parents, Little Fockers in the UK and Southeast Asia.
Yeah. And I guess the current title is supposed to make you think of little fuckers.
Yeah.
But is that a term? And I know, like Martha fucker, motherfucker. If it was called motherfuckers,
It's
I get
almost
it.
a term
It's little
like,
fuckers.
you know, look at that trail of ants. They're little fuckers. But It's a very rare. It's not often I hear people say that.
It's not very American either.
No.
Calling something a little fucker, that feels very
You
Kiwi.
little fucker. Yeah.
that feels like, oh, you little fucker.
You little fucker.
I could think you could save the sort of OCD mindset I have around titles here by instead looking at it as each sequel takes or expands on a phrase from the previous title.
That's what I'm thinking the pattern is. Yeah.
Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers, Little Fockers. So they're still there. But I would have preferred
Little Parents is the next one.
I would have preferred Meet the Little Fockers personally. And as I said, I also think The God Focker was probably in serious contention for the title. And probably, considering what happens in the film, is probably a better title, I think, for the movie. Yeah. All right, now we've got one of our final segments of the show. This is Continue the Franchise, where we all pitch a sequel or a franchise continuation. And while there don't seem to be any rumblings of a fourth Fokker movie, it is of note that two short-lived TV shows, a 2002 sitcom called In-Laws and a 2007 reality show called Meet My Folks, were both said to be inspired by Meet the Parents. There was almost legal trouble with, I think, In-Laws, because they were different companies, but then it was like Universal bought out DreamWorks or something like that. So it would have been grounds for a lawsuit had the company not been absorbed by the other. And I also want to give a shout out to the film Dinner for Schmucks, which is a Jay Roach film from 2010. And that very much feels like the spiritual successor to Meet the Parents. That's like super cringy. It's got Paul Rudd and Steve Carell in it.
Yeah, I just watched that for the first time recently, actually.
Oh, yeah. Is it still... It was very cringy when I saw it in 2011.
Yeah, it's very cringy. It's just about... single folks instead of the family unit is not the central unit of the thing. It's a friendship unit instead, but it's otherwise the same deal.
Yeah. The first trailer for Little Fockers actually debuted in front of Dinner for Schmuck.
Oh, there you go.
Fun fact.
It was the year of Jay Roach.
Richard, what's your Continue the Franchise?
Okay. Well, this might help get our creative juices flowing because I need both of your help to come up with a title for this, but this is what I have. So, fun fact, next year, Ben Stiller will be the same age that Robert De Niro is in the first Meet the Parents film. And so what I'm pitching is a film where, and you know, let's age them up in real time. So the kids would only be 16 now. And it's about the daughter, his daughter, has started, you know, maybe she started smoking and she's started, she doesn't talk to him for most of Little Fockers, but, you know, she's becoming a bit more rebel because she's got this new boyfriend who, Ben Stiller hasn't met him yet, but he doesn't approve of the direction it's going. And so he says, oh, you know, why don't you bring him over for dinner one night? And he's like, he really wants to intimidate this kid. So he calls up his father-in-law, Jack, and says, hey, you made me feel like fucking shit the first time we met. I want you to help me do this to this 16-year-old kid. And
this is such a good idea, Rich. This is obviously what Little Fockers should have been.
Passing the torch, yeah.
This is obviously what the third film should have been.
And so, but the thing is that this little kid the 16-year-old kid who would be oblivious, like, you know, impervious to all of their techniques. So now we're putting the power in the hands of a 16-year-old kid. And so Jack and Greg, try as they may, cannot force this couple apart. And obviously it would end with like a blockers kind of message that like, yeah, like kids should be free to do these kind of things.
Yeah, you're in hopefulness about the new generation. Yeah, knowing can sort their own shit out. You're at a disadvantage because I think the third one should be called The Godfucker, and this one should be called Little Fockers, the one you're describing for sure.
Yeah. I couldn't think of a title. I was like, meet the but I was trying to think of what's the first title from the perspective of Jack, because it's like if he's meeting the parents, it's like. Circle of Trust, but like it would just be called Meeting Your Son-in-Law.
Meet the Boyfriend?
Yeah, I did think Meet the Boyfriend, or yeah.
Yeah, no, totally.
But yes, that's my idea.
you almost just call it Meet the Parents, and it's the God of War situation where you just call it the same thing.
Yeah,
it's technically a sequel, or Halloween 2018, that sort of thing.
Call it God of War.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is one of those ones. This is maybe the third or fourth time it's happened that I'm like, damn, I actually really want this to happen.
No, that's such a good idea, and I like, and like you could get, like, there are enough famous comedic talents who could play the boyfriend at that age as well.
Pete Davidson.
He's probably a bit too old, but
well,
but that would be
even
cool.
better. He's dating a 16-year-old girl. It's Pete Davidson.
Michael, what is your continue the franchise?
My continue the franchise is called Situation Normal, all fuckered up. And it would involve the fact that Jack, now beyond like aging to the point where his legacy is no longer his concern. His concern is simple mobility and survival, right? He can't be as big of a force in the franchise. He has passed that on to Greg. We see in Act 1 Greg thriving as what they call the Greg Focker now, which means he is the new Jack, right? He keeps order. Jack approves of his methods. They still like rib each other, but in the end, they're the core of the family and they're keeping the family going. Forget about the kids. The kids are still just a set piece, because I think if they were going to do Meet the Parents of the Next Generation, they would have done it for the third one. They're not going to. So we're still milking the Ben Stiller, Robert De Niro thing. So how do we milk that further? The entire rest of the family gets kidnapped. Because Bernie and Roz take the extended family, including the kids, including little Jack, including Jinxie somehow, on vacation, and they all get hostiled by some maniacs. So Jack has to teach Greg through an earpiece how to go take in all these Eastern European monsters and get the family back.
That's so great, because it's also an idea that would only work in a sequel, because it's like the situation's so much more ridiculous. And like you're inviting a whole new way for Jack to be ashamed of Greg, like, because now it's not just that he's fucking up regular family life things. Now he's fucking up being a CIA operative. So
yeah, and I think it's key that you do the grounded version of CIA operative, meaning Jack is not telling Ben Stiller how to be in a spandex suit and rappel down the ceiling. He's telling him, like, go up to this guy. Now you got to be tough with him. You got to tell him you're going to kick his ass if he doesn't tell you where this hotel is. Yeah. And it's Ben Stiller muddling his way through trying to do that or trying to seduce someone. So I think there's some ground there. Now, they shouldn't do this and they won't do this, but that's my pitch.
That you both created ideas that feel so obviously what the next step in the story should have been. And my continue the franchise is nowhere near as good as that. So
well, let's hear it.
All right. I want to find Greg Gleneen. I've forgotten his fucking name. Gleena. I want to find his original script for Meet the Parents, and I want to adapt that into a stage play, because I feel like it has that vibe. It has the stage would be the family home, and you get different, there's the room with the urn in it, and there's the lounge, and you can have the different actors at different blocked at different points on the stage talking about each other, interacting together. And because I think it's so lo-fi, it did strike me as like it could be a stage play, I guess. It would be one that no one would go see, and one that it would be quietly fade away, but it had that vibe, and so that's my continue the franchise.
Nice. So you would continue this $1 billion franchise with a stage play adaptation.
That no one would.
This is why they don't give you giant franchises, AJ.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're totally right. My other idea was to just remake it and work out what are the generational gaps between the parent and the younger person these days and exploit that.
I'd love to see one that tried to actually reintroduce, because cringe is certainly still big. I just think that kids today find different things cringe. Yeah. So like I would love a Meet the Parents reboot that tried to capture like what is truly cringe humor
like
now?
you go meet your girlfriend's dad and he's like, how's it going, Deb?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, parents trying to deploy memes, I think, would be a large part of it.
Well,
Yeah.
there is the obvious one where it's like the dynamic is flipped, where you do meet the parents, but it's the dad is trying to impress the son. But I guess the stakes aren't quite.
And the son's just a psycho.
The son's like, I'm going to be a CIA operative.
And the dad's just this sweet old man.
What about like a who owns Meet the Parents at the moment? What company? Do they have a streaming service? I want to greenlight a Jack Burns prequel series of Jack Burns in the CIA days, and
on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, and it's very much like in the style of Pennyworth, that Alfred show without Batman, and it's like, what makes it Batman then? If it's just a British guy doing secret missions. It's like, what makes this Meet the Parents beyond the character's name?
Well, they throw in all these different like references, like he would love cats, and there'd be like season 3, there'd be a reference to milking one.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone would have nipples. Everyone in the show, without exception.
Sweet. All right, well, the last thing we've got to do for Meet the Parents is rank it with all the other franchises we've watched. This is arguably our 123rd franchise. So we don't usually have a guest here for this part, so I apologize if this is no bearing whatsoever.
I have a phone, I can check.
But yeah, we have 123 franchises, and we have something called the Nymphomaniac constant, which is Nymphomaniac being a 2-film franchise. We thought that the first one was one of the best movies we've ever seen, and the second one was one of the worst movies we've ever seen. So it represents the true zero of our franchise ranking. So things are either better than that franchise or worse than that franchise. Richard, what are you thinking about Meet the Parents? Are you thinking it's better or worse than the Nymphomaniac constant?
What? Send the list to Michael and let him have a look at it.
Meet the Parents will be on this list, but that's just because I have placed it at a random point in the thing, but that won't be where it stays. All right, I've posted it in the Zoom chat there if anyone wants to look at it.
I do.
Sweet. So
So yeah, we've currently got the Nymphomaniac constant at 53. So if that's the true zero, not good, not bad. Do we think it goes above that?
I think the good faith of the first original film, the kind of iconicness of the remake, and how, to be honest, all right Meet the Fockers is, would place it above the Nymphomaniac constant. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. What number is Nymphomaniac at?
53.
53.
Okay. All right. So we're above. So right above Nymphomaniac is the Mighty Ducks. I probably prefer Meet the Parents to Mighty Ducks. What do you think?
Yeah, agreed. Michael, if you're looking at this list,
I am. I think I'd float it all the way up to 47. I think I'd put it between Hangover and Halloween.
Interesting. Yeah.
Going next to Hangover is good, actually.
Yeah.
It's nice to group these franchises together where you're like, these are about the same.
And when I look a little further up, like I think Blade and Jaws and Kung Fu Panda are definitely stronger than Meet the Parents. But I think if I scroll down slightly, Hobbit, American Pie, Olympus Has Fallen, these are definitely worse than Meet the Parents. So it's somewhere in the 44 to 48 range.
I like it next to The Hangover because that puts the two highest grossing adult comedy franchises next to each other.
Yeah, you've got like a classic,
a
classic comedy with a sequel which is more or less the same but a different location, and then a third film which tries to do something different, and while it may have its moments, it doesn't work that well. But then also, of course, with Meet the Parents, you've got the addition of the thing. So I would probably put it above The Hangover, below Shanghai Noon.
Yep, I agree. I think that's probably the quickest.
Chuck those two Owen Wilson franchises next to each other, baby.
Yep, I love it. Michael, is there any like egregious disagreements you have with our list?
What is this? What's number 3? Oh, 3 colors.
Yeah.
I've only seen red, but it is excellent. I need to see white and blue.
Actually, fun fact, since recording that episode, 3 Colors Red is now the only movie with a 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic.
Huh.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a great film. The Raid could afford to be high. See, I'd put The Raid over Lethal Weapon personally, but no, I'm a big fan of this list.
Cool.
By and large, everything's where it should be, I think.
Excellent.
Minor,
Yeah, but
variances.
we will probably agree. A lot of the stuff, like, we'll look at it later and be like, why'd we rank that there? That's so confusing.
Not a fan of Scary Movie, generally.
Fair enough. No, that's fair enough.
Yeah, but there's a lot of these that where like if there's because like Fast and Furious is quite high up, even though it's your mileage may vary, no pun intended. But it's like the story of that as a franchise is so interesting that it's like its place in the annals of franchise history.
Twilight is suspiciously high.
It's because it's the age difference between you and me and Richard.
Oh, okay.
That's totally like Twilight is like this little comfortable nest egg in my heart that I also hate, but it's totally because I was of the right age when it came out.
Yeah, and also we interviewed Chris Weitz, Paul Weitz's brother, directed the second one, so we've obviously got a soft spot for that. But also, it's kind of a running joke with this podcast. Not even a joke; it's just a running truth that Charlie Swan, Bella's dad from those films, is like one of the greatest film characters of all time.
I feel the exact same way about Nymphomaniac, so I get it.
Sweet as. All right. Okay. Before we reveal what our next franchise is, which was decided by our patrons over at patreon.com/cultpopture, Michael, if people have enjoyed listening to your voice, where can they find you these days?
Oh, yeah. For more of this voice all the time in your ears, head on over to patreon.com/smallbeans. Patreon, you gotta love it. And I do we do a wide variety of podcasts, occasional sketches. We hope to do more of those once COVID abates. Yeah,
nice.
Small Beans, check it out.
I discovered your Off Hours, the sort of spiritual sequel to After Hours. Discovered it later than I would have hoped I would have. I discovered about a year ago and was like, holy shit, it's back. I was so excited. So go check out Small Beans, yeah.
Well, FYI, we just, the four of us, the core After Hours folks, just finished scripting yet another.
Oh, because I watched you did
bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did a bonus thing. Yeah. Sorry, you explain it.
Well, we had the show called After Hours. It got cut off abruptly.
Yeah.
We wrote a finale that never aired, so we did a reading of it. At that reading, we set a charity goal, which was reached, which forced us, I must admit, against our will, to write another new After Hours episode. So if you know what I'm talking about and you're a fan of After Hours, check out Small Beans, because very soon we will have a reading with the original cast of a brand new After Hours episode, never before released.
And Michael, I told myself I wasn't going to bring this up, but I'm just going to. I actually
will you marry me?
Here we go.
In 2015, in the midst of a pre-life crisis, I actually applied for a job at Cracked when you guys were all still there, and I actually wrote 2 After Hours spec scripts and sent them to you guys and never heard back, but that's okay. I'm not telling you to make you feel bad. I just thought
why would you tell that story?
I don't know. I've written 2 After Hours scripts. Well, I tried to anyway, so there you go.
All I can say is we did get occasionally folks submitting scripts, and we did shoot 2, I believe.
Damn.
So,
close.
Yours was not good enough, I guess.
That's all I've ever wanted
if that makes you feel any better, AJ.
Sweet, that is all good. I will lick my wounds on my own time. And of course,
but we got to do this together. This is like live improv comedy. Man.
That's true.
We got 90 full minutes of After Hours-esque debate. I love it. This is essentially the conversations we would have that, you condense this into a script. You got an After Hours. You know what it is.
This podcast is actually going to be 5 minutes. When it comes out.
So, of course, if you're wanting to find Cult Popture, we're on all the places. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Just look up Cult Popture or email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. You can join our Discord and you can donate to our Patreon, patreon.com/cultpopture. And speaking of Patreon, the current winner of the next film franchise, Fortnights franchise, as voted on by our patrons. If you pay $1 or donate, I should say, $1 or more. Pay makes it sound like it's like a greedy corporation.
Makes
thing.
sound dirty.
Yeah. But the winner is what I actually think is the weirdest patron decided franchise we've ever had. It's the 2 George of the Jungle movies. So
Wow.
tune in next fortnight for us covering
Good
George
poll,
of the Jungle
audience.
and George of the
Yeah.
Jungle 2. Yeah, to give you a taste, a couple of other franchises on this that were suggested this
that it
month.
narrowly beat.
We got Indiana Jones, lost by 2 votes. Percy
Sure.
Jackson.
Well, you cross Indiana Jones and George of the Jungle, and you get The Mummy, which is the official film of the Small Beans Network.
cool.
So
I love The Mummy.
I'm
all
pleased.
ties together.
I think I've seen The Mummy probably more than I've seen any other movie, like more times. I watched that every week when I was like 7 or 8.
I've seen it once and I thought it was fine.
It's wow. We don't have 3 more hours, but also I'm not the right half of the Small Beans troupe to be here explaining.
Right.
My partner Abe should explain, but it's a perfect movie.
I agree.
And you can
Yeah.
filter everything I said about Meet the Parents through that lens. If you agree about The Mummy, then I'm a reliable source.
So when we asked you to come on our show, Michael, we originally asked you to be on the Barbie episode, and you were like, no, but I would come on a different episode.
Yes. I was like, I will talk about movies and watch movies for free, and we can chat about it, but I'm not going to watch 8 Barbie movies. Come on.
That's fair enough. What? Because you sent us a bunch of suggestions, franchises you'd be willing to do. What was it about Meet the Parents that made it onto the list?
Honestly, that I was so excited to rewatch it and sort of check in with the state of, because the one thing that stood out when I scanned my eyes over the list, the thing that surfaced in my mind was, oh yeah, I remember watching that and thinking, this is the most on edge of my seat I've ever been in a comedy. My heart is about to burst out of my chest. I can't believe how tense this is. I bet it doesn't feel that way anymore. I want to see if I'm right. And I was. It feels different now.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Nice.
And it's also cool this is a cool franchise to do because it's one of those ones that, like, I mean, even though Little Fock is grossed insanely high, but these franchises where people know and have seen some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know anyone that's actually seen Little Fockers, but people that are interested to know what
It was
it's
a good
like.
excuse to complete the set as well.
Yeah.
That's what this podcast is. All right. Thank you so much, Michael. And we'll let you go now. And listeners, stay tuned for our post-credit scene, which we still need to record. So that'll be fresh because this episode is also coming out in a couple of hours. It's basically the length it'll take me to edit. I'm going to throw it up because this is coming to people a little bit late this week. So, yeah, thank you, Michael. And we'll...
Yeah, because Michael was too busy dealing with a celebrity's schedule. And we were like, oh, I can't imagine how hard it would be to deal with someone more famous than you's schedule.
It was Ben Stiller, all right? You gotta know. No, it's true. I had shoots, and I do appreciate audience blame me. I hope I made up for it with my witty quips
You
and
absolutely
insights.
did.
But I'm the reason it's a day late. And let's end on that awkward beat.
And true Meet the Parents fashion.
I fucked up your shit. Sorry.
All right, and we are back with the post-credit scene. This is, of course, a segment of our show where if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/Popture, you get to give us a little thing to talk about, a cute little thing to talk about. And today, which one of these should we do? We got a bunch of new ones down here. Do you want to pick one of them?
We should really do this before. I did think that there's this one that we should probably do at some point because it's I feel like it has an expiry date.
Okay, let's do that one.
Okay, so this comes to us from David Draper. Hi, David, who asks, what are your thoughts on the Julian Dennison Subway ad? Now, there's obviously some context required here. So, Subway is a sandwich shop and the kind of... okay, Julian Dennison, we've spoken about him a lot on this podcast, more than we should for someone that, there's a very real chance could listen to this podcast or could have a friend recommend this to them.
Local celebrity Julian Dennison, who's also very least started his career as a child actor. So the person we've been making fun of is a child actor.
So Julian Dennison is Ricky Baker in Hunt for the Wilder People. He was in Deadpool 2. He's the MacGuffin of that film, essentially. He's going to be in Godzilla vs. Kong. He's the bad guy in Christmas Chronicles 2. He pops up in things now and then. And his whole kind of shtick is that he's like a chubby New Zealand kid from like the streets. And it's played to perfection. And the whole of Hunt for the Wilder People is written around this kid existing.
And unfortunately, he supremely sucks in almost everything he's been in. He ruined the Christmas Chronicles 2, a movie that was not even that great, but it's just astonishing.
Didn't need ruining.
It's astonishing how bad he is in that, and we've progressively watched as, one of New Zealand's only world famous celebrities basically has just been done embarrassing role after embarrassing role. He did an Air New Zealand safety video.
So this is what I was going to say. So Air New Zealand, our regional airline, or one of our regional airlines, is kind of famous for doing these fun safety videos. So they did a Hobbit one. They got Ian McKellen. They got the cast to do these things like, the safety videos where they show you where all the exits are and all, and the mask will come down. It has all that, and then what else have they done? The first one they did was where it was like the attendants with like their skin painted rather than the uniform, so it was like naked, like just the safety. It's but yeah, so and they're quite big budget. They tend to be, and there's like a bit of an event each year when they release the new one. They did one called It's Kiwi Safety, which starred Julian Dennison and a local rapper called...
I don't know. You know so much more about this than... Lars Rainder.
Yeah. And in it, they rap a parody of It's Tricky by Run DMC. And... you might think that's not a really relevant song. It's not. It's not a New Zealand song.
Welcome to Air New Zealand safety videos.
Yeah. But so it was like, it's Kiwi to be safe and fly. It was honestly, normally I would say here, like, oh, go look at that. This is actually one of the worst pieces of content I've ever seen in my entire life. And you're trapped in a fucking steel cage when you watch it, and if you're not paying attention, they tell you have to, and it's so long. It's the longest one they've done. It's over 5 minutes long, and like if English was your second language, you would not know what the fuck they are saying.
And it has all the creative energy of like a soccer mum wearing her new Christmas sweater, trying to entertain her kids by changing the words to tricky. Like a parody's got to reach a certain level before it crosses that threshold. Yeah. And this does not reach that level.
Yeah. And so this is like features Julian Dennison rapping, and it was universally hated. Yeah. Like actually like a visceral reaction. They pulled it.
Recently it came out, Air New Zealand has committed war crimes. So fuck them as well on that.
But yeah, like I genuinely, I forced myself to watch it so I could have an informed opinion on it, but I was watching like through the cracks in my fingers. It was that bad. And then at the end of 2019, Subway announced they were cutting ties with or Subway New Zealand at least, might have been international, but they were cutting ties with their advertising agency. And this was like, and they held a bidding war for a new advertising agency to represent them. And they came out at the end of last year or start of this year. They came out with the first new ad from the ad campaign from the winner of the thing, and it features Julian Dennison rapping a parody of a 90s song, and it's him doing a parody of the Fresh Prince, and it's like, yo, skip that grease and eat fresh instead. And it's all about like, my life.
This is a story all about how my sandwiches flipped upside down. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's terrible, and it plays everywhere. It's an unskippable ad on YouTube all of the time, and it's honestly like you have to have known. You can't have lived in New Zealand and not known the response to that in New Zealand safety ad, and you thought that was a good idea to emulate. It's insane. It's insanity. It's It's god awful. To answer your question, David, I fucking hate it. I don't know how anyone could like it. And if you go on the Subway New Zealand Facebook page, and whenever they post the video, people are like, "This is trash." And they go, "Oh, well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but I think The Fresh Prince and Eat Fresh is a match made in heaven." And that's not. I had no idea that was the connection until I saw that comment. It's garbage. It's bananas.
That's why they made the comment.
It's insane.
I think what's so truly almost deceitful about it is that if Julian Dennison wasn't in it, I think he would hate it. Like, he's the demographic of the people of
that's pretty cringe.
Yeah, it's pretty cringe. He would say it's cringe.
Yeah. And it's also like, having a quite clearly overweight teenager talk to you about like how they love eating fresh and eating at Subway. It's like, I mean, okay. Problems aside, I understood Jared as a mascot, and that or actually, let's go less problematic. Clay Henry, remember Clay Henry? He got real big on burgers and fries.
Saying that,
now he's down to a smaller fries.
Are you saying that Julian Dennison is worse than Subway Jared?
Yeah, but like it's not about like a transformation or something like that. It's just like, look, this fat kid eats Subway.
And
that's the whole ad.
What boils my blood, Richard, really, is that whoever is Julian Dennison's agent has put me, another chubby New Zealander who's older than this kid, in a position where I have no choice but to acknowledge how trash his work is. I don't want to do this. I think it's mean-spirited. I think it's borderline bad. Like, we maybe shouldn't release this post-credits scene because of how close to home it is. We will be, because this episode has to go out very shortly. But it's Julian. Julian, if you are listening to this, my dude, it's not you.
Let us manage you.
Yeah, exactly. I think the problem is the people who represent you don't get what you can do, or want you to just do the same thing. And I think
we should do an off-week podcast that's fixing Julian Dennison's career.
Wow.
And get him on for it.